Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined by my co-host Jeff Cohen. As always, we have a jam-packed episode on the Roundup today. We've got a lot to talk about. We are going to break down the hitter and pitcher of the week. We're going to talk about Bryan Ramos's call-up. We are going to dive into some questions on my recently released top right-handed pitchers list within the organization. We're going to talk about outfield depth. We've been kind of doing a little bit of positional group depth each week. This week is the outfield. And then, as always, we're going to talk about some of the top performers from the system. So we've got a lot to talk about today. We'll start with our records in a second. But first of all, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Oh, good, Elijah. I was thinking, I know we're going to get to the records of each affiliate in just a second. I was thinking about what we talked about last week, which is that each and every affiliate had a winning record. And, in this these schedules that were driven by COVID, where teams play another 6 games a week, that means you've got to win 4 games. We may not see that again in a couple of years where all 4 of them win.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive actually last week. This week was a little bit worse, but still, like we've been talking about, every week there's something to watch at each level. There's some excitement. There's some players that really show out, and that's why we, every week we're here to recap all of that because there's excitement at every level of the White Sox organization right now. Even the Major League team was at a pretty good week actually. So going through the records, Charlotte is now 13-19 going into this week. They'll face Gwinnett. Birmingham is 19-7. Jeff, that team just continues to destroy everyone in their path, frankly. The Birmingham Barons are one of the better teams I've seen from a White Sox affiliate in quite some time, frankly. Winston-Salem is now 11-16 after a bit of a rough week. And then Kannapolis coming in at 13-13, an even record for Canny. And that's a team in Canny who we kind of expected them, or at least early on before they get some reinforcements, to struggle a little bit more. And they've actually been pretty solid. They've been in some games, even the 13-13, they could be a little bit better than that, frankly. They've had a few unfortunate late game situations. So pretty good overall stuff from the affiliates. It's been a solid week. But the first thing we got to talk about before we dive into all the minor leaguers and this positional list, one of my favorite guys in the organization. It's just truly a class act as a person, as a player, as a teammate, in every way. Bryan Ramos got a call up this week. Kind of confusing, a little bit out of nowhere. It was interesting because it came in a week where he was kind of finding his stride, right? He really struggled out of the gate in Birmingham this year, and then Ramos was starting to catch fire in Birmingham, and a week after starting to really heat up in Birmingham, he gets the call straight from AA to the major leagues. It is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most, more a result of the 40-man situation than it is of Ramos being necessarily deemed ready. But with that said, first start last night, a sac fly, a single, a run scored. He looked good. The at-bats were solid. He looked comfortable. He was steady at third base. What do you think, and what was your kind of initial reaction to the Bryan Ramos call-up?
Yeah, I had mixed emotions, given that it was probably just going to be a limited call-up until Danny Mendick came back off the IL. Because, as you said, he was just starting to hit, and I hated, in a way, to see him lose that momentum. But, there's a part of me that thinks, okay, he's up there. Let's see him do so great that they have to think twice about sending him down. Wouldn't that? Do you think there's any way he could just force himself?
There's a world, Jeff. There's a world, because right now when you look at this roster, right, like the offense has been a little better lately, but it's not good, right? It's still one of the worst, if not the worst, offenses in baseball. So you look at a guy like Ramos and a position at third base where Moncada's not going to be back for a little while still, and like if he continues, if he'd have to light it up for sure. It's not like, he can have a few hits and stay up. He would have to really show out. But if Ramos comes into this lineup and gets playing time, he's playing again today, so I think he's going to get, regular starting reps at third base, at least for the time being, right? So if he's starting every day and he's one of the 2 or 3 best hitters on the team, can you send him down, right? Like, he's already been on the 40-man for a year now. So it's like, it's not like this is a guy that, I get he's still super young, and he is really, he has some things he was still trying to figure out in Birmingham, right, this year. But if he comes up and spends 2 weeks with the team and is one of the better hitters in the lineup and is holding his own at third base, what are you doing sending him down, right? He's been on the 40-man for a year now, right? Like, he was a young guy when he came up, and he made his way through the system at a really young age. So he's been on the 40-man because they had to protect him. So like, if he's already on the 40-man and you look at the rest of the roster and see the options for the infield and he's playing well, like, there's a chance.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's fun to dream on this week.
Yeah, it's fun to just watch too. Like I would rather be watching Bryan Ramos than almost everybody. And that's so going back for some clarification for everyone, right? The 40-man roster right now with Moncada on the 60-day IL, Danny Mendick goes on the 10-day IL, and then the obvious choice, Lenyn Sosa, who just got sent down, is actually on the IL in Charlotte as well. So it's now you're in a spot where I don't know if he actually got put on the IL, but Sosa is hurt, is what we heard. So you're in a spot where Bryan Ramos was literally the only other infielder on the 40-man that was not in the major leagues or on the IL. So that's the situation the White Sox were in. And you could have ended up calling up, an outfielder like Colas and Fletcher, and then just having Shoemake be an everyday starter for the time being, or Lopez be an everyday starter for the time being. But at the same time, like, they needed an infielder, right? Like there really wasn't, because even if you don't bring Ramos up, right, then you've got Shoemake, DeYoung, and Lopez in the infield, and there's no backup there. So they had to bring an infielder up, and the only other option then would have been to DFA someone else and re-add a guy like Remillard or somebody along those lines, which would have been fine. But you got to remember, this is a team that's already DFA'd like 9 players this season, Jeff. So it's like it's super. I get why they did it. It makes sense, and I hope that he runs away with the job.
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be great.
So
I've been thinking about every time he comes up to plate up in Chicago. I keep thinking about you because I know how fired up you are about him.
Yeah, I've just been a big supporter of him. And this is a guy, like, I said this the other day. I did an appearance on a different show, and I was saying this. Like, Ramos he's a great player. I think he's really talented. He's also just one of the best dudes I've ever been around in the organization, right? Like, this guy, when I was in Birmingham last summer, Jeff, like, he's the guy that is just always positive. He's smiling ear to ear. He's happy to be there. He's encouraging his teammates. He has worked really hard to get good at English so he can kind of be able to communicate with guys. He was sort of the bridge between some of the Spanish speakers and the English speaker last year in Birmingham, and this year, I assume, as well, right? Like, this is a great dude who works really hard and is really talented and has a chance to be the third baseman of the future in Chicago. And it's cool, even if it's for a week and a half. Like, I'm happy to see a taste of it. It makes the White Sox more fun to watch.
Right.
So that's Ramos. We're excited about that. We're fired up. Let's get into our hitter and pitcher of the week, and then we're going to break down the top right-handed pitchers list. We went with a for hitters this week. We have hitters of the week with Wilfred Veras in Birmingham and Rikuu Nishida in Kannapolis. Kind of fun little pairing here. 2 players that could not be more different, right? You've got 6'4" Wilfred Veras, massive dude, tons of power. And then you've got Rikuu Nishida, who's maybe 5'4", and is just, the little bundle of just energy and pop, and he has a great plate approach, and he makes pitchers really work for it, right? So 2 totally different players. Wilfred Veras in Birmingham this week was 8 for 21 with a home run, 5 runs scored, 3 RBIs, a walk, and a stolen base. And then Rikuu Nishida in Kannapolis was 7 for 19 with 3 doubles, 4 RBIs, 5 runs scored, 4 walks, and 2 stolen bases. Really great week from both of them. Veras is a guy that I'm higher on than everybody, and I've been for a while. The chase rate is rough. He's still striking out over 30% of the time. But Wilfred Veras can just hit, Jeff. I mean, this is every level we see him at. He just continues to rake. He has the second best OPS in the Birmingham team behind Brooks Baldwin right now. He has the second best, pretty much everything. He has 1 home run less than Edgar Quero. He's just a great, great hitter when he gets the bat on the ball. And that's what it comes down to. Like, he's going to have to refine the approach, but he hits line drives like nobody's business. It's easy power for him, gap to gap. And he just continues to show out every week right now.
Yeah. As you and I talk about a lot, Birmingham is often what separates the guys with potential from the guys who really are a little out of their depth. And Veras has not had a problem at all in AA, and clearly looks like a major leaguer in development.
Yeah.
And then,
go ahead. No, you take it.
Well, I was just going to say about Nishida, he does a little bit of everything. Whenever I watch him, I mean, he'll take pitches, he'll foul them off until he can draw a walk. When I was at the game last week, he must have fouled off 4 or 5 pitches in one at bat until he drew a walk. And, on the year, he has 21 walks to 13 strikeouts.
Yeah. It's impressive stuff. It's not going to be he's not going to be the most impactful player, right? Like, in terms of like power run production, right? You're not going to see him drive in a ton of home runs, or he has no home runs, right? He's a contact guy, but the approach is excellent, almost a 400 on base percentage because of those 21 walks, right? You get him on base, he's going to steal some bags, he's going to mess with the pitcher's timing, he's going to fight at bats, he's going to draw long counts, right? Like you just said, like he makes pitchers work, and that's something that it's hard to kind of see. I don't know if I see him getting. I don't know what I see for beyond that, right? Like it's a little bit hard to imagine at the upper levels seeing him continue that success. But at the same time, like having a guy in your system, even if it's at the, high A, double A level, who forces pitchers to work and he makes them uncomfortable and he draws walks, right? Like that's only going to benefit the rest of the team. So that's something that's cool about Nishida is he just he helps everybody else perform better in that lineup right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wrestle trying to see what the future holds for him, but I mean, he's dominating low A, and he should have no problem at high A with this game. It's at Birmingham that I think maybe he runs into some issues.
Yeah, and shout out to Rikuu, shout out to him also for his birthday today. I was talking to some of the guys. I heard that today was his birthday, so that's cool. And he's just, he's still a young guy. He's going to keep progressing, hopefully. And a really good week from him, and a good week from a lot of the guys in the Candy lineup. To be honest, a lineup that is seeing some significant improvement from the beginning of the season when we looked at that lineup and said, we don't even know who half these guys are. And now you're looking at that lineup, and they're putting up good at bats every game right now. So that's exciting. And then Veras, is just one of the many guys in Birmingham, obviously, who has been excellent offensively. But he, especially this week, Veras was just phenomenal all week long. So there's our hitters, our co-hitters of the week. Our pitcher of the week is none other than Peyton Pallette. And I am excited to talk about Peyton Pallette, Jeff, because I believe that this week was the best start of his professional career, not just this season, not just his time in Winston. This is the best start I have personally watched from Peyton Pallette since he's been with the White Sox organization. And I'm hoping that it's a sign of things to come for him because his first 3 starts this season had some shakiness to them. And in general, right, like this is a guy that we've said, this is the year for him. He last year was about getting him healthy, getting him recovered from Tommy John, all that stuff. That was way more important than the results. This is the year where I want to see that step from Pallette. And this game could be a big start of it. His start this week, he went 5 innings, 4 hits allowed, no walks for the first time this season, and 7 strikeouts, no runs, 5 scoreless innings from Pallette. Overall, the stuff was crisp. He was locating the fastball. He was generating whiff on it. The slider was sharp. And he was just able to find the spots he wanted to find this week in a game where he didn't have to, sometimes with Pallette, it kind of feels like he's just trying to force strikes in there to get into the zone because he knows he has stuff, but it's kind of just forcing it into the spots he wants it to. This week, it was like he was able to work all over the zone where he wanted to and command it and not, it was consistent strikes, right? Like I'm going to pull it up right now, 52 of 74 pitches for strikes. So almost a little under 70% strike rate from Pallette this week. So it was command, it was consistency, the whiffs were there. He was getting guys just missing at everything, and really just an overall great start from Pallette this week.
Yeah, I think we'll both be really interested to see what he does this week, if he can build on that start last week. And I'll just point out one other thing. It's great to see Tanner McDougal and Juan CarelaA do well, and we hope Tyler Schweitzer can get it turned around. But it's a different story with Pallette. He was a second-round draft pick. And I think, you really want to hit on those.
Yeah. And not just hit on those, but like this is a guy that he was borderline first round talent before going into college before his injury, right? So like this is a guy that was in a similar ilk to Grant Taylor, who we're going to mention a little bit later in the show, right? Grant Taylor is also this past year second round, coming off Tommy John, tons of upside. Like so, if we're looking at Grant Taylor right now, which I know everybody is, like we're looking at Grant Taylor as like a legit top prospect, right? Like we need to see that from Pallette too, and this is the year to see that growth. And this start was the first little like moment where I was like, this guy looks really good today. So I want to see the next few starts from him. But like, this is someone who we not just want, we expect him to be in Birmingham later this season, but we got to see more from him in Winston before that can even be on the table yet. So I'm hoping it continues. Great week for Pallette, very much earned the pitcher of the week. And it was just overall, just great stuff from him in this start. And I think we're going to be carefully watching his start for Winston this week. Shifting gears a little bit, I guess Pallette is going to be part of this next conversation, but I released my top right-handed pitchers list. This is something I was supposed to work on earlier at the beginning of the season, lost track of it a little bit, a lot going on, but I came back around to it this past week and was like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to break this down because like we've talked about, pitching depth right now, the best it's been in quite some time. Going through this list, I was like, wow, there's people at the bottom of this top 10, just right-handed pitchers. This isn't even left-handed. I'm going to have the left-handed list coming out soon, which will feature, obviously Noah Schultz leading the pack there, but a lot of talented arms there as well. But just on the right-handed pitching side, the guys, it was 10 guys and 3 honorable mentions for me. All 13 pitchers I wrote about on this list could become major league pitchers, Jeff. Like there's a real world where all 13 of these guys could be a major league arm in the future. And that's incredibly exciting and something that was not the case. And when you look at this list too, like a lot of these guys have come into the organization in the last year or two. So this wasn't the case at some point, right? Like it just wasn't. So I'm excited to go through this. I'm going to go through the list and we're not going to break down every player because we do that all the time. We talk about these guys a lot. But I'm going to kind of walk you through a few of the spots where I debated who should be above the other one, right? And we're going to kind of contemplate. So number 1 is Drew Thorpe. That was a given. That was a lock. He's the number 1 right-handed pitching prospect in the system. He's a top 100 prospect in baseball. I think he's going to be top 50 in baseball, honestly, in the midseason. He's been that good, and he's that consistent. The 2 and the 3 is Nick Nastrini at the 2 and Jairo Iriarte at the 3. I really got close to putting Iriarte 2. I'll be honest with you. It's tough. I think Nastrini for me just gets the nod because he's a little bit older. He's got similar command issues to Iriarte, but he's just further along. Does Iriarte have more upside? Probably. What do you think about Nastrini versus Iriarte at the 2 and the 3?
No, I think you're right. I think they both have great upside. Yeah, Iriarte probably does have a little bit higher upside. But I think the risk with Nastrini is a little bit lower because he's already demonstrated he can pitch at the major league level. It's a little disconcerting that he's struggling a bit now. But in fact, I went to his start last Friday here in Charlotte, and he really struggled that first inning. But for the next 5, he gave up just 2 hits. I mean, he was very, very good.
Yeah, so it's tricky with Nastrini, right, to gauge right now because this season has been so up and down for him. He was sick, and then he was up, and then he had 2 starts and went right back down, and then it's just been a rough season for him. But looking at it blankly, like these are the 2 and the 3. I don't know exactly which one should be 2, to be honest. There's definitely an argument for Iriarte, and I completely respect anybody who would put him above Nastrini right now. But these are the 2 and the 3. They definitely belong in those spots. The 4 is Jonathan Cannon, which I think is pretty solidified in my mind, just because we have seen the floor with him, right? Like we know he's proven already in AAA that he's pretty solid. He had a rough start this week, but a solid arm. He's got a high floor. He had a really good major league debut. So overall, Cannon earns that 4 spot. The 5 for me, 5 and the 6 is another one I want to ask you about. The 5, I had Grant Taylor, who was a 2nd-round pick with upside for days, going to be starting in the Arizona Complex League, working his way back from Tommy John and everything. And then the 6 was Mason Adams, who we've talked about a ton and we're both huge fans of. Totally different profiles, right, for a Taylor and an Adams. What do you think about those 2 in the 5 and the 6?
Well, it's interesting. The decision is almost like the Nastrini Iriarte. One, Mason Adams has demonstrated that he can do it. He's doing well at AA. Yeah. The other, Taylor, has just gobs of upside. We're getting good reports out of Arizona. Hopefully we'll see him in Kannapolis soon. So again, I think it's splitting hairs to worry about which one, 5 or 6. But
yeah, I agree. I think Adams has looked amazing this year, and that's part of why I was almost tempted to put him at 5. But with Taylor, you could make an argument that Taylor – actually, I don't even think you can make an argument. I think it's kind of the truth that Taylor has the most upside of anybody on this list. Like if you're talking pure upside, what we saw at LSU, he was a projected 1st rounder before he went down with Tommy John surgery, right? Like this guy's upside is through the roof. The velo is insane. I mean, we've heard him hitting 100 miles an hour. I think right now, even coming off of TJ and him already being in the upper 90s is really impressive. So Taylor, I think, got that 5 spot for me just simply because he has just so much upside and some of the most upside in the system of any prospect, frankly. But that's not to slight Mason Adams at all, who moved up, in comparison to our preseason top 30 at FutureSox. Adams being at 6, he leapfrogged a few guys who were ahead of him on that preseason top 30 because he just has continued to show out every single start he makes. It's great. I mean, it's this week he had a rough first inning and then proceeded to not allow a single hit from the next 5 1/3 this week in Birmingham, right? So it's just his ability. I made a tweet about this, right? And his ability to bounce back is up there with every pitcher in the system. Adams is the type of guy where he will have an inning where, he leaves a few things in the wrong spot. He gets hit a little bit. And he always proceeds to then dominate after that. He's just really, really good at adjusting and changing where he's putting his pitches based on what's happening in the game, and then coming back and performing better in the next few innings, right? So those two at 5 and 6, you really can't go wrong. I'm super pumped about Adams being a big league option soon, and I'm super pumped about seeing Taylor start to get some game action because we know how much talent that arm has.
Right. And you know what's interesting about Adams as well is, you've got him at number 6. Where do you think he was a year ago? Like, he wasn't even in the top
15,
12.
Yeah, not even exactly. I mean, there was nothing, right? This time last year, we were just starting to see his first few professional games, piggybacking Noah Schultz, and we were like, oh, here's a late round draft pick who's pitching out of the bullpen and looks pretty good. Like, and now it's like both of us took notice of that last year, and we watched him last season just continue to get better, work his way all the way to Birmingham, and now he's one of the many pitchers in Birmingham that looks like big league pitchers.
Yep.
Moving on to the 7 and the 8, one guy we just talked about, but it's 7. This was a tough one for me, actually. And I kind of, part of me after seeing this list, I actually released this list right before Pallette's last start. And part of me after seeing this last start makes me want to flip it. But 7, I had Seth Keener, and 8 is Peyton Pallette. I went back and forth with these two. Different types of profiles, different types of pitchers, but both high round draft picks, both have some command issues. Keener has looked pretty good this year, a little bit of walks, and that's been the big issue. But generally speaking, like, he looks better than most of the hitters he's facing in single A. But he's a college pitcher. He's facing single A guys. Like, he should be doing well there, and he is. Pallette, coming off TJ, struggled to start the season, but this week, like we just talked about, pitcher of the week, looked excellent. I kind of went back and forth. Before this last start, I bumped Pallette to the 8 behind Keener because he's been struggling this season, but then he turns in his best start of the year. So the 7 and 8, Keener and Pallette.
Yeah, both high draft picks. Yeah, you can go either way.
Yeah, it's tricky. And then moving on from there, the final two are Tanner McDougal at the 9 and Aldrin Batista at the 10. McDougal, I also kind of in the same tier as Pallette and Keener, I think. Similar kind of elk, right? A former high draft pick. He was a high school guy as opposed to the college guys, right? But a lot of upside, went through TJ, has shown flashes this year. He's had some rough games. He's had some good games. Generally, the stuff is good. You got to see a really good start out of him when you were there watching him. But an exciting arm, but some things that still need to get worked out, I think, right?
Yeah. I got to tell you, Elijah, the start I saw was one of the more impressive starts I've seen this year in White Sox affiliate. I mean, he had that fastball just dotting the outside corner and then getting a lot of swing and miss with it at the top of the zone. And then his breaking pitches were real effective.
His curveball is excellent when it's on, for sure. Yeah, so a good start. I mean, Pallette, again, everybody on this list is really talented, and that's what's so exciting. And then you've got a guy at number 10 like Aldrin Batista, who's one of my favorite arms in the entire system. And he just hasn't proven as much as the rest of the guys on this list so far, right? So I think him just being younger, he's only 20, right? Like, he just hasn't proven enough yet. But at the same time, Aldrin Batista has been lights out this season, Jeff, and he looks like the command is strong. He generates whiff, and he just looks like one of the more underrated prospects in baseball, in my opinion. And I think Batista, being at 10 right now, like, he has so many years to go behind a guy like Pallette, behind a guy like Keener, behind a guy even like Mason Adams, that like Batista could climb up this list rather quickly because of how young he is and because of just how good he's already been this season.
He's been so good that he's the best pitcher in the system not named Thorpe. He's been that good, barely unhittable in his first 4 starts. Yeah,
truly. He's been excellent. So Batista at number 10 is someone that just shows the depth of the system more than anything. The fact that he's the 10th ranked arm on this list is pretty crazy considering how good he's been. And then the honorable mentions, we got a few in there. Sean Burke, who is going to be starting his season with the ACL. He's coming off of a shoulder injury. I talked to him about a month ago, did a great interview with him. Super good guy. He's working hard. He's getting back. He's feeling good. He's a guy that could be a big league option late this season, potentially, if he's fully healthy and back in his groove. And then Juan CarelaA, who was acquired last season at the deadline, has had some good games. This week was his best start of the season, probably. So looks solid. And then Mathias LaCombe, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm still not 100% sure. The French draft pick from this past year, who signed for way over slot. The White Sox were super intrigued by his upside. Was really good at community college this past year, and then the Sox took a chance on him in the 12th. So, another exciting young arm to keep an eye on. So there's a lot of good arms, Jeff. This list was fun to put together because I really think that all these guys could be, big league pieces at some point.
Right. And again, I'm just looking at everyone's start for the last week in the system. And there's still other guys who we haven't even mentioned, with Jake Peppers, Lucas Gordon. It's such great depth.
Yeah, it is really exciting. So we're going to move on a little bit. We're going to kind of breeze through some of these top performers. Thanks for going through that list with me. That was fun. It was a cool list to put together. And then we're going to kind of zoom through the minor league levels because we've still got to talk about outfield depth at the end of this episode. Charlotte, there's one guy and one guy only I want to discuss here, Jeff. Tell me about Colson Montgomery's week because, it hasn't been the prettiest of seasons for him so far, but super young, doesn't have a ton of games under his belt. He looks like he's starting to find the groove a little bit in AAA.
Yeah, he is looking a lot better. He had a home run last week when I was there that it's probably still traveling. It was out of the stadium onto the street. He is starting to tap into that power. He's looking comfortable at the plate. And he's getting a little more aggressive. It's crazy. He needed to get a little more aggressive. He was taking too many called third strikes.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that hasn't resulted in less walks, though. That's what's cool to see because I think some of the concern with him was, where's that patient approach going? And it was there, but it was almost too passive at times.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing in the past 5 games this week, so his first 5 games of May, 5 walks, 3 strikeouts. That's the Colson Montgomery we know, including 2 home runs as well that I should mention, right? So 5 hits, 5 walks, 3 strikeouts in his past 5 games. That's the Colson we know and love, and that's the Colson that, it took some time, and it's still not going to be a perfect product. But him finding the balance between patient and passive and being able to be patient with his approach and generate those walks, but then also let it rip when he needs to with those 2 huge home runs this week. That first home run you mentioned was, I think, 114 off the bat. And then the second one yesterday was 105 off the bat.
Yeah.
So it's coming along. Yeah. So exciting stuff from Colson. It's interesting. It begs the question with Ramos being up, what does that mean for Colson's timeline? But I don't want to rush it. I'm not interested in Colson coming up anytime soon, frankly. I think he's starting to figure things out in AAA, but that's good. He should be, and that's where he should be for a while. I think, once you get to All-Star break, trade deadline, then we can talk. Right now, May and June, I want Colson in AAA, and I want him doing everything that he just did this past few games over the course of 2 months, right? Yeah. So exciting stuff there. Going to Birmingham, we talked a little bit about some of the guys in Birmingham, Wilfred Veras. I want to talk about a few pitchers. Jairo Iriarte with another really impressive start this week. He intrigued me this week because I think it was a little bit of a different style of a start from Iriarte than we're used to. I think we've gotten kind of accustomed to him being more of a little bit shorter outings. The walks have been up there, but he's been limiting contact. This week, he allowed a lot more hits. He allowed 8 hits, which is by far the most, which is, I think, the same amount as like 3 or 4 of his starts combined, probably. But with those 8 hits came 7 full innings of work, only 1 walk, and still 7 strikeouts. So Iriarte, a different style of start, but it's interesting to see him kind of see that command get a little better, but have it kind of and more efficient with his command, which allowed him to go 7 full innings, which we haven't even seen him get into the 6th this year. But it also came with some more contact. What did you think? What do you think about that kind of difference in his start?
I think he's been pretty solid all year. I didn't see this start, so I really don't want to say too much about it. But he's right out of the gate. He's been fairly consistent. Yeah.
It's consistent, but it's also a different look from him this week, which I kind of like seeing. It's interesting to see him work in a different way, in a way where he was able to get through 7 innings and limit his pitch count way more compared to the first 4 starts. So overall, just great stuff from Iriarte. I think he's just an excellent player and someone that is going to keep rising. And he's the youngest guy in that Birmingham rotation by almost 2 years and is going to continue to get better and better. And he should be there most of the season. Going over to giving a little bit of props to the Birmingham bullpen for a second. I want to talk about a few guys in that bullpen who intrigued me because the starters have been great and they haven't made the bullpen work too much because the starters have been so good. But the bullpen's been pretty good in its own right this season. We talked about Gil Luna recently in a previous episode. I want to give the spotlight to Andrew Dalquist for a second. This is a guy who was a high school 3rd rounder, right? Like when we went through and we looked at all the draft picks, Andrew Dalquist was a guy that I think we kind of marked as like it hasn't really worked out for him. 3rd round pick last year, he spent the entire season in Winston-Salem as a starter primarily. Really struggled. The command was iffy. He wasn't getting a lot of chase. This year, instead of trying to keep him as a starter with all the depth in this system, they said, yes, he struggled at Winston. We're going to put him up in Birmingham, but as a reliever. Andrew Dalquist now, through his first 6 appearances this season, 7 1/3, only 5 hits, 0 earned runs, and 8 strikeouts. Kind of interesting. I saw him come into a game the other day, and I was like, this is a guy who didn't really work as a starter, but every time I've watched him out of the bullpen in Birmingham, he looks really good. So I'm curious to see, and I'm kind of marking him down as a guy to keep an eye on, because this was a guy that had a ton of arm talent coming out of the draft and being a high school 3rd-round pick. And it hasn't worked yet, but just because it didn't work as a starter, we've seen this, Michael Kopech, right? Like, some of these guys can really become legit relievers.
Yeah. To get him to go out for 2 or 3 innings once through the batting order, it can be really effective. And that can be a nice career.
Yeah, exactly. So I liked what I've seen from Dalquist. I wanted to just give him a little bit of shine here because he's adapted to the bullpen role really well and looks like a solid arm out there. And then 2 different pitchers that were promoted this past week to Birmingham from Winston-Salem. The first one's Eric Adler, who I was kind of preaching for the longest. Let's please get Eric Adler to Birmingham because he's just was too good to be in Winston anymore. He just dominated at every aspect, right? 8 games in Winston, 5 of them saves, not a single run allowed, only 3 hits allowed in 9 innings in Winston-Salem to start the season. That's crazy. Had a rough first game in Birmingham, but first game in AA. I'm not worried about that at all. Eric Adler should be one of the key bullpen pieces in Birmingham, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it to Charlotte by the end of the year because this is a guy that was a 6th-round pick as a guaranteed reliever, right? Like you don't see many guys go top 10 rounds when they're going to be a relief pitcher. That's really not a common thing. But with Adler, the arm talent was impressive enough, and he was so dominant at Wake Forest that it was like, even as a reliever, this guy could really be something. I'm excited to see him in Birmingham over time. And then the second one is Garrett Schonely, who pitched in Birmingham for much of last season, but struggled there a lot. And then this year started in Winston, looked great, so he earned a rightful promotion to Birmingham.
Yeah. I follow the North Carolina affiliates much closer. I know you're all over Birmingham, and I kind of defer to you on that. Did Adler get a second appearance last week?
He did not. He only had 1. And it was a funky one too. It wasn't really even his fault. It was a weird there was an error on a play, and then there was a play that wasn't an error, but probably should have been an error. And it was a weird little inning. It's nothing I'm really worried about. Only 1 game though. So I think he should probably be one of the first relievers used this week in Birmingham. So I'm excited to see him get another shot.
Right.
But great stuff from those 2, both of them. They both deserve to be in Birmingham. That bullpen was already strong, and they added 2 more arms that are both going to be solid out there. So pretty exciting stuff. Moving on to Winston-Salem, the one guy I wanted to talk about that we mentioned a bit earlier on that list was Juan CarelaA, but we kind of talked about him. Has dealt with a lot of command issues to start the season. I think it was kind of just he wasn't really finding his spots quite yet. I think his few starts have been shaky. It hasn't been bad for him. He hasn't been bad by any means, honestly. But this past start, 4 innings, only 1 hit, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, no runs for CarelaA. So probably his best start. His second, he had another really good start in April too. It's been up and down, right? It's been like 1 good start, 1 bad start, but this was another good one for CarelaA. We'll hope to see him kind of find a little bit more of the consistency, but generally speaking, this is a guy that, he in spurts, he has shown us that he's a really solid pitcher for the Winston at the high A level.
And he wasn't on your list at all, was he? In the top?
He was the honorable mention. Yeah, he was in. Yeah. He was on that 3 honorable mentions. So he deserves to he was on our top 30 to start the season, right? He was right there. He was ahead of Batista actually, I believe, on the top 30 to start the season. Falls off a little bit, right? But still a really exciting arm to watch. This is a guy that was. You got to remember, some of these guys, the way they were acquired, right? Aldrin Batista for international signing money from the Dodgers. Juan CarelaA for 2 months of Kenyon Middleton. Kenyon Middleton means nothing to the White Sox, right? Juan CarelaA, even if he's the 13th best right-handed pitching prospect, pitching depth is great. Yeah. It's awesome to have. And CarelaA, I actually think his makeup, you keep him as a starter right now because you have a spot for him, but his makeup could be a really dang good reliever, Jeff. So a lot of these guys, you can look at some of these pitchers and say, hey, we have so much depth in the pitching system right now that if some of these guys just don't look great as starters at some point and the command isn't quite there, put them in the bullpen and get them to work because some of these pitchers that we're mentioning, right, could be excellent relievers too.
Right. Some are going to make major league starters. Some are going to become really effective relievers, and some are just not going to pan out. But yeah, there's some reliever arms in there for sure.
100%. CarelaA is definitely someone I could see eventually becoming a really solid reliever if he doesn't end up being a starter. The other guy we want to mention briefly in Winston is Jacob Gonzalez. Jacob Gonzalez looks good, Jeff. I don't know how much I know. I'm hoping that you're going to be able to get. I think they're away this week. I know, but I'm hoping that sooner than later. Or are they away this week? Or are they home?
I think they're home this week.
Home this week.
Yeah, I think they and Canny are both
home.
home.
Right, Winston and I flipped it. Winston and Kenny are home this week as opposed to last week, so maybe you'll get to see him this week a little more. But Jacob Gonzalez looks really good. He looks like the player that was drafted in the first round, as opposed to the player that we saw last year. And this past week, he was good again. Right, like it's a confident approach. It's steady, right? Like this. I mean, in this series, right, his 4 games that he played in May so far, 3 walks, only 1 strikeout. He's getting on base. He just 5 hits in these last 4 games, right? So he had a home run this week too. So it's contact, it's approach, it's discipline, and it's somebody who's getting on base just all the time, right? Like he's really consistently getting on base a lot right now. On base percentage just under 400 for Gonzalez this season, more walks than strikeouts. It just every week it's looking a little better. Every time I tune in to watch Jacob Gonzalez, I'm like, he looks more and more comfortable.
Right. And, as he gets more confidence, it's just going to get better and better. I was looking at the year-to-date stats because, we've talked about how much the hitters in Kannapolis and Winston-Salem struggled out of the gate, but I think both teams are really starting to heat up.
Yeah.
It's exciting. So I was looking at year-to-date stats. Jacob Gonzalez leads Winston with 26 hits. He's got 8 extra base hits. And as you said, 15 walks to just 11 strikeouts. That's elite.
Yeah, it is. The approach is great. I mean, that's one of the selling points of Gonzalez, and we are seeing it very clearly right now. So great stuff from him. Winston as a whole, the worst record right now in the system, but like there's some players that are really fun in Winston. I think the record is a result of some funky games, a few blow up starts for sure from some of the young pitchers, but generally speaking, like it's a fun roster still, and there's players to watch, and Gonzalez is the head of that lineup right now, and he looks great. He looks really, really good. Moving down to Kannapolis before we get into our outfield depth, we're going to do Kannapolis, and then we're also going to mention the ACL, which starts tonight, actually. Kannapolis, the one guy I want to mention offensively is Drake Logan, who just got back. He was kind of injured to start the season, missed some time starting the year. This is a 2022 late round draft pick. Drake Logan, good first week with Canny. He looked good. He had a home run first of the season, some RBIs. He was steady getting on base. He got on base in all, but I actually think he got on base in every game he played so far with Kannapolis. So 5 games into the season for Drake Logan, he's got 5 hits. He's got 5 hits. He's got 2 walks already, home run, some RBIs. Another guy that's just worth keeping an eye on, right? Like it's that Canny team has a lot of recent draft picks, and majority of that team is recent last 2 years draft picks. And Logan's someone who now healthy is going to add another piece to that lineup.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, that's one of the reasons the team is heating up. You've got Drake Logan joining the team. Eddie Park joined the team, and he's been really good right out of the gate. And Ryan Delaney has been solid all season. Nishida, to get things going at the top of the batting order. Their offense is coming around.
It is coming around, and there's more reinforcements on the way for sure,
right.
Which we're going to get to in a second. But Seth Keener, the one pitcher I want to mention in Canny from this week, because I really liked what I saw from him. I got to sit down and watch his start. It's tricky because the starts aren't necessarily the prettiest, but it was a late little blow up type of situation, right? So it's more spurts of struggle than consistent struggle sometimes. But with his line, it looks a little bit misleading to me because you see a guy who was really solid for most of the innings he pitched and then had an inning where he struggled, right? So it's like that doesn't really reflect accurately in my mind on how good his start was, because I'm going to walk through some of these at bats for him, right? He had a clean first inning, a single but that was thrown out going to second, right? Then he had a little bit of a rough second inning. He hit a batter, 2 singles, got out the inning, 1 run, no damage, right? Third inning, 1, 2, 3. Fourth inning, 1, 2, 3 again, or 1 walk, but 1, 2, 3 otherwise with 2 strikeouts. Fifth inning, 1 hit, nothing else, no damage, right? And then he comes off of the 6th inning, he lets a few runners on base, he leaves the game, 3 runners come home that were given to him, but not when he was pitching, right? So, right, like that's 5 innings of really good ball, and then a 6th inning where he struggled, got pulled, and the runners that he inherits, that the reliever inherits, come in and scoring, right? So, yeah.
Sounds like a damn good start to me.
Exactly. This is why you gotta, I mean, it's simpler, easier said than done, right? But you got to look further than the stat line sometimes, because you see, and you look at Keener's stat, and you see 4 earned runs, 2 walks, 5 1/3. You're like, that's a mediocre start, right? But he had 5 innings of 1 run ball and 1 hit allowed, or 2 hits allowed, I think. Yeah. So that 6th inning, sure, he gives up a few hits, he gets pulled, the runners come and score off his watch. It is what it is. Overall, really good start. Keener looks good. I think, right now, I think him and Batista are the 2 guys that are like, I want to see them take the spot in Winston when the trickling starts to happen that we've talked about before. It's going to be some time still, but, he looked good. I liked what I saw from him for 5 innings in his start this week. Moving forward to the Arizona Complex League, which kicks off today. And for those who don't know, the Complex League is kind of where a lot of recent draft picks, international signings, really young players, rehabbing players, and in the case of a Sean Burke, Grant Taylor, start their season. They play games at the spring training facility against a bunch of other Arizona Complex-based teams. It kicks off today. Our James Fox, our leader at FutureSox, wrote a great preview, so definitely check out that on FutureSox.net. We've got kind of just breaking down the entire roster. But in terms of headlining pieces, right, this roster is pretty fun, and a lot of these players are going to be in Canny before we know it, but for the time being, there's a lot of really intriguing players on this roster, Jeff.
Yeah, I read James's article this morning, and I learned a lot. Yeah, I mean, he breaks down every player. A lot of DSL guys, a really interesting roster.
Yeah, so starting with the pitching, obviously Grant Taylor, who we mentioned, right, is the headlining guy, right? He's going to be one of the top prospects in the system sooner than later. Sean Burke is rehabbing there. Christian Oppor and Mathias LaCombe, both those pretty, well-regarded draft picks from this past season. Young guys, community college, they still need some time. They're going to be there to start the season. You've got guys like, international guy like Maximo Martinez, who came over with Aldrin Batista in that trade from the Dodgers last year. You've got a Tristan Stivers who's rehabbing there as well. So, a lot of pitchers that are worth keeping an eye on there. And then you go over to an offense and you've got George Wolkow, obviously, my guy George, who's 7th round draft pick, tons of pedigree. He's going to be, he's super young. He's probably going to spend the whole first half of the season, if not most of the season, in Arizona. He looks great. Abraham Nunez is a big-time international signing who looked really good in the DSL last year. He'll get his first taste of stateside ball this year. You've got some, Javier McGonagall, who's one of the top international guys, ranked number 23 overall for the White Sox. Ryan Burrows, who probably would have been in Canny, but Burrows was coming back off an injury. He broke his hand, I believe. So he's kind of going to work his way back in the ACL. He'll probably be in Canny sooner than later, though, I presume, right? A lot of other international guys, international catcher, Steven Flores, who's I've seen a lot of really good things about him, hearing that he's kind of a high upside catcher. He was mashing last year in the DSL. So really fun roster in the ACL. I highly encourage everyone to go check out James's article on that. And we'll get to talk about some of those guys because sooner than later, they're going to be playing games. And then a lot of those guys will make their way to Candy this season as well.
Yep.
So definitely keep an eye on the ACL. The last thing we've got here today is outfield depth. Before we get into the names, Jeff, the last 2 weeks were a little disappointing. I think we talked about middle infield depth. We talked about corner infield depth. And both of us came away saying, it's not great. There's some pieces and there's some cornerstones, right? But the depth overall is not great. Do you think that this outfield group is going to be significantly deeper than those infield groups?
Well, you tipped me off last week not to despair that I was going to feel a lot better about the outfield group after being so down about the middle infield and corner infield lack of depth. And you're right. I mean, there are interesting guys up and down at every level.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yep.
And it's a difference too, because I don't think there's as many guys on the outfield list that are top prospects, right? There's not a Colson Montgomery. There's not even a Bryan Ramos, right? But there's a lot of solid players, and there's a lot of players that could really become something. It's not star-studded, but it's way deeper than the infield group.
Right. And it's at every level. I mean, even at Charlotte, I can't remember the last time we've had 3 outfield prospects on the same team at the same time. And this year we've got Dominique Fletcher, Oscar Colas, and Zach DeLoach.
Yep. So you just started us off right there, right? Yeah, it's exciting. So you got Fletcher, Colas, and DeLoach at the Charlotte at the AAA level, right? I don't like all those guys. Do I see any of them being like everyday major league big leaguers? I'm not sure, to be honest. But Fletcher has the making of a really solid fourth outfielder. He's got a ton of speed. He hits for contact. Oscar Colas, we've seen look a lot better this year. Zach DeLoach, a lot of power, some things to still figure out with the swing. But, all three guys that at the very least, solid organizational depth and legit prospects, right? Yeah. Then you go down to Birmingham. You've got four outfielders in Birmingham that I enjoy watching, right? Wilfred Veras, we talked about a lot today. Jacob Burke and Terrell Tatum, who are both really natural center fielders, but can play anywhere in the outfield. Both excellent defenders, great speed. They both, have questionable bat impact, right? But they're just both, at the least, they're both, speed, defense, contact. And then a guy like Duke Ellis, who's one of the quickest players I've ever watched. I'm not sure Duke Ellis is quite a prospect, right, at his age, but at the same time, incredible speed, just ridiculous speed on the base paths for Ellis. And then you go down to Winston. In Winston, you've got Samuel Zavala, who was the key piece, one of the key pieces of that Dylan Cease trade alongside Thorpe and Iriarte. You've got DJ Gladney, who has been with the team for a few years. A lot of power. Sean Gusenberg, who's an older guy, more of a depth piece, but, has been one of the better hitters in Winston this year and continues to do it. He was last year, too. I don't think we really give him enough credit for what he's done. And then Mario Camilletti, who's another guy that had a really strong first professional season last year and is just another, solid depth piece to have. Then we go down to Kannapolis. We've just talked about all these guys today. Most of these guys, at least, Rikuu Nishida, Eddie Park. Nishida plays infield more sometimes, but he does play some outfield. Park, Caden Connor, who's really impressed me this year in his first team year with the season. Albertson Ossigan, who has looked really solid. We talked about him last week. And then you go down again to the ACL, like we just talked about. You've got George Wolkow, who's one of the top outfield prospects. You've got Abraham Nunez, who's a big-time international guy. There's just a lot of solid pieces up and down this system in the outfield.
Yeah. It's the depth that we were hoping we were going to see in the infield. I was thinking about the Birmingham team as I took a closer look at the numbers, and we talked about Brooks Baldwin and his 400 plus OBP. In fact, it was close to 500 a week ago. And you combine that with Terrell Tatum and Duke Ellis, and all these guys are getting on base for those big bats, right? For Cuero and Veras and Ramos when he was there. I can't imagine being an opposing pitcher, These guys all have OBPs around 400.
Yeah. And the thing that's funny is some of those big hitters behind them aren't even really hitting much yet. So that lineup is just going to get even better when you've got, Burke. Burke has really struggled to start this season, right? But Burke's a guy that we know Burke was really good last year, and this promotion, they're moving him quickly through the system. So it's okay for him to struggle a little bit. Same thing with a Tim Elko, right? Who's having a little bit of regression from last year where he was just raking, right? But these guys are going to have time to adjust. There's no rush. There's depth, especially with the outfield. They've got time to adjust and to make improvements. Meanwhile, you've got guys like Tatum and Veras who are just destroying the ball right now. So it's solid. It's not. There's a need for a star, and we can talk about this on a future episode. I know you're not super tapped into the draft side of things. There's a name that I have circled as the guy I want at the 5th overall pick, who is that kind of should be a star outfielder. Braden Montgomery of Texas A&M is the guy that I have as my number one kind of target for that draft pick. I think there's still a need for one or two more kind of the high upside outfielders, but the system overall in terms of outfield, much stronger than infield. And I do think that there's going to be kind of a need to fill some infield depth via the trade deadline, via the draft, and all those other aspects, right?
Right. And, you say, well, Duke Ellis and Terrell Tatum, at best, they're fourth outfielders. They're great OBP guys, and you look at the White Sox, and one of the issues they have is nobody can get on base in front of the power bats.
Completely right.
And then the other guy who's supposedly has a lot of upside, he's off to a bit of a slow start, is Samuel Zavala, but really highly regarded and one of the higher rated outfielders in the system. And then one other guy I want to talk about, Sean Gusenberg. You're right. He was a 19th round draft pick and maybe just an org guy, but every time I'm checking a box score, he's had a big hit. I mean, he's the most clutch player on that roster right now.
Yeah, no, completely. He's been excellent that whole season. So this whole season, and he was good last year too, right? That's a guy who's he's a little bit older. He's not a highly regarded guy, but he's done nothing but hit for the last year and a half. So it's good stuff from Gusenberg too. Really just a deep system of outfielders, I would say, in comparison to the infield groups we talked about. Pretty solid overall, and I'm excited to see some more talent infused. And like we've said before, the pitching system is there. You really don't need to focus that much energy towards more pitchers. they got to get some hitters, right? Like this draft class, like you've got, 20, especially with we got the extra pick from Baltimore, right? So 21 draft picks this year. Should 15 of those be hitters, Jeff? I think so.
Yeah. I wouldn't have a problem with that. You want to restock arms every year, of course, but you've got to get some bats. We've got to get more bats, more high upside bats.
You got to take some swings, some high school bats. I think you got to take some swings at some guys who are, high upside bats that, it might be a little tricky. It might take them some time, right? But like, you got to take some swings at some guys that are, ceiling type bats where you can look at them and say, George Wolkow, right? Like I loved that draft pick for so many reasons, but that's the type of picks that you need to make when you're the White Sox right now. And you're in somewhat of a rebuild and you look at the system and you say, the hitting is still not quite there. So let's get some more bats in the system. Let's continue to stock it up and add talent to the roster, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all we got today, unless you got any other thoughts, Jeff. That was a lot of different things we went through today. I'm hoping that we're going to have some cool, unique topics coming up. If anybody ever has any ideas that listens to us or things they want us to talk about, please feel free to hit us up. You can hit up my DMs. You can reach out to the FutureSox account, whatever you want. If you want to listen and you have ideas of things you want us to talk about, we are more than happy to talk about anything White Sox farm system related, honestly. And on top of that, I will have a lot of interviews coming up. I have a variety of some of these players we talked about today, some guys that are kind of, more under the radar that you might not know them all that well. I'm hoping to provide, now that the season's rolling, everybody's got their groove going on. I'm hoping to kind of give some of these lesser known prospects a chance to share things about themselves and for us to learn about how they kind of view the game and what they're working on right now. So that'll all be coming up soon. You got to make sure to follow Jeff at AAA Jeff on Twitter. I am at Elijah EV8 on Twitter. And we will be right back here next week for the FutureSox Roundup.
Sounds great.